Welcome back, and we have another week of box office. Some very interesting numbers. Let's not fool around. Let's get into it. Up first, & Juliet. 92% last week and 808K to this week's 93% and 808K, 987, so not much of a difference. Then we have Boop, which, I mean, listen, guys, at this point, it's just a matter of time until it closes. 78% last week and 514K. This week, 76% and 476K. I mean, it is truly bombing super hard, and I don't think I even need to go into why I think it's gonna close, because it's just obvious. It's that obvious. Vista Social Club selling out. 1,164,304 last week, and 1,196,100 this week. Cabaret, the Kit Kat Club, continues to do very poor numbers. 88% last week and 822K, and this week 85% and 771K. So I think they should just close it at the end of the year. Again, Miley Cyrus is supposed to come in, and now there's rumors that Billy Porter might come in the summer, but this is not a sustainable model, and they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it is looking very bad. Dead Outlaw, 84% last week and 507K. This week, 85% and 504K. Again, is it doing objectively good? No, it's losing money, but we've been through this many times. I think that it's not caught on the way that the producers of the show wanted it to once it got the Tony nominations. But I think, again, Dead Outlaw, Floyd Collins are very, emblematic of two shows that are very much subversive pieces that have stories and songs that are not based on romance, that have songs about running and being stuck in a tunnel, and I think that it's more our society that is the problem than these two shows, because I think they tell stories in a vignette ways, or in ways that are a lot more slower, and we're used to very fast-paced A to B to C romance stories, and when we get musicals and movies that subvert that traditional model of storytelling and what we expect from a story, a lot of audiences are turned off from that. But if we had more of that, it would become normalized, and then the normal stuff would become the abnormal stuff. And I also do think that these are two very weird, divisive pieces. Not everyone loves these shows. They're very, you could say, slow-moving shows. And I would say Dead Outlaw has more traditional mainstream music than Floyd Collins. But still, they are both about death, and a lot of people don't like that subject. They're very macabre. They're very dark. They're very hard to market. And when you have a season where you have Death Becomes Her, you have George Clooney, you have, the jukebox musicals of Moulin Rouge and MJ and Hell's Kitchen. The mainstream audiences, the tourists, are going to want to see those shows over a small, obscure, original musical that has left a lot of people divided, and they might be like, well, you might like it, you might hate it. You don't ever want that to happen, because if it does, typically the hesitant tourist or person that maybe will take a chance on a new musical will not see a new musical, or if they do, they'll see, maybe Happy Ending, which is great for maybe Happy Ending, but not for Dead Outlaw. Dead Outlaw has done a good job at marketing in terms of getting out music videos. I mean, before the show began, they had clips of the music, which is what got me into it. I think that is always beneficial. And they released I Killed a Man in Maine. They were on the Today Show. They're doing a TikTok trend. They're doing top 5 reasons. So they're pushed to see the show. They're trying, which is much better than something like Kimberly Akimbo. But I feel like, and they released a trailer that kind of told you what the story was about. But I still feel like they're focusing a little too much on the reviews and the Tony nominations, and I think you really just gotta push what the story is out to people. But again, it's just a hard show to market. It's almost an impossible show to market, and I don't envy them for doing that at all. But I feel like it's, again, truly, some shows can be marketed the heck out of, and they can still not do super well because of how out there, how different the content is, and stuff like Akimbo, Outlaw, Loop are just so, well, they shouldn't be so out there concepts, but they are, and they very much focus on untraditional people or stories, that it's going to have a harder time attracting the public. And again, you want to make these musicals successful, the landscape has to change. The landscape is not forgiving and is not going to be accompanying of musicals like Dead Outlaw because they are not the norm. So again, I think the only way that a show like Dead Outlaw of Floyd Collins would succeed is if they were the norm, and shows like Death Becomes Her were not, and that's just not the reality that we live in. So it needs to win Best Musical. Otherwise, it's going to close this year. Death Becomes Her is doing phenomenal, 98% last week and 1,343,867. This week, 96% and 1,330,600, so not a huge decrease. Now, it's been rumored that Death Becomes Her is the front runner instead of Dead Outlaw, and it's more maybe Happy Ending versus Death than maybe Happy Ending versus Dead Outlaw, which is very interesting. Because I think, critics and audiences are very different in terms of Dead Outlaw, so I do wonder, like, is that the audience just putting off their own wants, or is it what the nominators want? Because I feel like people that would nominate Dead Outlaw and would make it win, I think it would be more appreciating of it, but it feels like it's a very divisive show that I think could be ahead of its time. So I'm not confident on Dead Outlaw winning. Floyd Collins, 76% last week, 511K. This week, 74% and 513K. Gypsy, 76% and 1,180,227 last week. This week, 73% and 1,142,179. Hadestown, 94% and 594K last week, to this week's 92% and 645K. I'm doing a lot better, but again, the jury is very much out on Hadestown. Harry Potter continues to fail, 75% last week, 710K. This week, 76% and 789K. So I really wonder if this will close this year. Hell's Kitchen, 93% last week, and 1,064,763 to this week's 82% and 975K. Just in Time continues to be a box office smash, selling out 1,173,110 last week to 1,161,166 this week. Maybe Happy Ending continues to be dominating, selling out this week at 101% compared to last week's 99%, and 1,927,000 last week to this week's 1,004,624. It's the highest average and top ticket I think they've had in a while or ever. And again, it just shows that if this can win Best Musical, this I think can have the box office take of a Hadestown, of a Dear Evan Hansen, which we have not seen since Hadestown. I don't count Outsiders because it was based on a property, and Akimbo and A Strange Loop did not do that. So maybe Happy Ending, I feel like, could definitely ascend to that, like, astronomical level if it wins Best Musical. Moulin Rouge, 97% last week and 1,148,184 to 97% this week and 1,152,473. Mincemeat, 96% and 761K last week to 98% and 757K. Pirates, I didn't cover last week, but that's because it's a limited engagement and it's not doing super well, so I don't feel like I need to cover it. But it's surprisingly not doing great. It's like 496K. Curves is doing horrible, 66% last week and 385K to 63% this week and 351K. I mean, at this point, a closing announcement is imminent. Redwood finished very good with 74% last week and 627K to 84%, 818K. Six is continuing to falter, 78% last week and 610K to 72% this week and 617K. But again, if you look at the numbers before this month, it's actually been doing very good. So I think this is just a small bump, and it's been going for 3 years, so it makes sense that it's starting to wane. But I still think this has plenty more years left in it. Smash is turning out to be the next New York. 76% last week and 838K. This week, 78% and 790K. So it's definitely headed in the wrong direction. And I think it's going to continue to decline. Stranger Things is is a big disappointment. 82% last week and 880K. This week 79% and 875K. And again, I think it's because there's been so many years between seasons. It's not being marketed right. It is must-see for season 5, and it is definitely a show that is not good enough to maintain decent ticket sales when tourists aren't there. And then also Matt Koplik, shout out him. I listened to his podcast, and he said, another thing is that this play is quite dark and quite adult, and so, when you have more adult and darker, mainstream, big musicals, they don't do as well, and Stranger Things definitely is not for the whole family. And I also think that is not had the nostalgia factor that these other IP musicals have had, which is vital to older properties working. Attention is not on Stranger Things right now. I think when the new season comes out, I think it will boost, and if it doesn't, that's bad. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I think it's I don't know if it's gonna run for maybe as long as Netflix wants, but Harry Potter is still going strong, but so we'll see. Lots of people don't want to watch all 4 seasons to kind of get caught up on Stranger Things 2. Sunset is doing very solid, 81% last week and 1,115,410 to 88% and 1,262,121. Gatsby, 84% last week and 943K to this week's 87% and 957K. And the last 5 years is failing spectacularly with 77% last week and 563K, 754 to 84% and 563,502. And on their Instagram, the last 5 years is like, oh, this is why you should come see it. And it's pretty desperate and sad. Outsiders sells out, doing softer numbers, but still spectacular numbers, 1,102,032 to 1,164,484. And then Wicked is the highest grossing musical, as always, with $2 million. So those are the numbers for this week. Like, sub, comment, follow me on Instagram. I'll see you in the next video next week. Peace.